Samantha stood near the entrance of the Army Aviation exhibit, her eyes fixed on the giant matte black frame of the Apache simulator. It loomed like a beast caged, but waiting ready to be unleashed. Its rotors frozen mid-spin in a freeze frame of military power. The crowd moved around her, but she did not notice any of them. Her focus was unshakable, not on the people, not on the hum of conversation, or the sound of children pointing at planes suspended above them. Her heartbeat drowned everything. Out steady and strong, she had waited so long for this moment, longer than anyone there could have guessed. She had spent years tracing the edges of that cockpit through grainy online photos, dreaming of how the seat would feel beneath her, how the controls would respond to her touch, not just because she loved helicopters, not just because she admired pilots. It was something more, something deeper that had followed her for as long as she could remember, a need that started with a sound when she was 9 years old, the sound of blades chopping through the sky as a formation of Apaches flew over her foster home like angels made of steel and fire, and from that moment she had been chasing them. She never told anyone what those helicopters meant to her, not her foster parents, not the teachers, who thought she was brilliant but troubled, not even the psychologists, who asked too many questions and understood none of the answers because she knew they would not believe her. She knew they would never understand that sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night with coordinates in her head, with diagrams she had never studied, drawn perfectly on scraps of paper in the dark with numbers that matched real military equipment. She was never meant to know, and yet she knew them all the same. She stepped forward slowly, her badge hanging from her neck, marked civilian guest, and the soldier at the simulator nodded without suspicion, only curiosity, as he handed her the sanitized headset and gestured toward the open simulator bay, his smile polite, his eyes scanning her like they did every other visitor, unaware that behind her calm posture and quiet presence, something else was moving, something precise and old and very, very focused. She climbed into the simulator with ease, and as her hands touched the controls she felt a jolt, not of surprise, but recognition, like shaking hands with a long-lost friend. The switches, the joysticks, the displays, all of it felt like home. Like this was where she had always belonged, like the cockpit itself had been waiting for her to return. The technician, watching her, hesitated, his clipboard lowered slightly as he glanced through the observation glass. Something was different. She had not asked a single question, had not paused to find her bearings, had not even hesitated when she began initiating the startup sequence. He leaned closer, narrowing his eyes as she powered systems one by one in perfect sequence, not a second fast or slow, exactly as they were taught at Fort Rucker, exactly as the manual dictated. And yet this woman had never trained there, had never been in the Army, had never even filed a flight certification application as far as any of them could tell, and still she flew like she had been born inside the machine. He turned to his colleague with a furrowed brow and whispered, low enough that she could not hear it, I think we need to watch this one more closely. As she settled deeper into the simulator seat, the weight of the headset over her eyes and ears, everything around Samantha disappeared, replaced by the immersive view of the simulated battlefield terrain stretching out before her in high resolution. Detailed dust kicking up from the desert floor, wind currents traced in data lines, enemies marked in glowing red outlines, friendly units blinking blue in the periphery, and yet none of it felt new. None of it felt foreign. She knew this landscape, like she had flown it before, even though she had never physically left the ground in this way, not legally, not officially, not on paper. The controls responded to her touch with such smooth precision. The tech, watching from the other side of the glass, found himself leaning forward, jaw tightening, eyes darting between her hands and the monitors he had seen trained. Pilots fumble through these sequences, especially civilians. They often needed coaching through startup procedures, weapon arming, navigation, even the throttle. But this woman, this civilian guest, was running through advanced systems, like it was nothing, like it was instinct, and every second that passed added another quiet question to the growing tension in the room. She rolled the Apache into motion, lifting off into simulated airspace with a perfect hover transition, and then nosed forward into tactical speed while maintaining altitude. Like it was second nature, the onboard system began to log her flight profile, and even the AI running the simulation flagged her behavior as advanced operator level. The technician Reggie whispered to his colleague again. Did you see that she just reconfigured her TADS settings in flight without prompting? Who does that on their first try? Nobody does that unless they already know the whole interface. Samantha, meanwhile, was calm too. Calm for someone flying a simulated combat aircraft for the first time. Her breaths were slow, her posture relaxed, not stiff, not anxious, her eyes tracking enemy markers before they even appeared on radar. One hand adjusted weapon parameters, while the other managed altitude, as if she were dancing with the machine, not controlling it, but moving with it, understanding it in a way that no one in the control room could fully comprehend. The others started gathering behind the glass, some off-duty officers, some simulator staff drawn by the quiet unease in the air. They watched her work silently, whispering among themselves, "Who is she? Why is she flying like that? Did she say she had training?" None of them had answers, and every question only deepened the confusion because nothing about her flight style made sense. Her reactions, her situational awareness, even the way she managed system load during rapid-fire sequences pointed to someone who had done this before many times over, and yet her name had never come up in any military roster, ever as. The simulated mission continued. She began engaging ground targets with perfect accuracy using laser-guided Hellfire missiles, cycling through threats in a pattern too deliberate to be lucky. Not a single wasted round, not a single unnecessary movement. Her precision was surgical, cold, exact, and not a trace of celebration crossed her face. Not smile, she did not flinch. It was as if she had seen it all before, lived it before, and now she was only following a path already written in her memory. Then it happened. One of the supervisors in the back room stepped forward, watching the side feed from an auxiliary camera, his gaze sharpening on the monitor. Something caught his attention, something small but strange, a slight reflection. Just behind her ear, a glint that looked like metal, where there should have been nothing. He paused. The frame enhanced the image, and stared at what he saw, his voice low, and even when he spoke to no one in particular. "That is not a headset connector, that is something else." Entirely, and suddenly everyone in the room stopped talking. The room fell into a tense silence as the technician's words hung in the air. Reggie's eyes remained glued to the zoomed-in image on the monitor, where a faint outline glimmered just behind Samantha's ear, almost hidden beneath her hair. But impossible to ignore, it was a tiny metallic implant, the kind you never expected to see on someone not in the military, especially not on a civilian guest. Standing quietly in a simulator, E.G. swallowed hard, feeling a cold chill run down his spine. He glanced nervously at his supervisor, the older man who had years of experience flying Apaches and dealing with classified projects, but even he seemed caught off guard. He motioned for the room to clear, except for a few trusted staff, while the others were quietly told to return to their duties. The mood was serious now. This was no longer just a training exercise. This was something else. Samantha, inside the simulator, remained unaware of the growing tension outside. She was focused on her flight path, executing maneuvers that no untrained pilot could manage, as her fingers danced across the controls with precision and speed. The targeting systems locked onto moving targets, and she launched virtual missiles that streaked across the digital sky, hitting their marks with deadly accuracy. But the technicians watching her could no longer ignore the implant. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. A small silver device embedded beneath the skin, an interface port designed to connect directly with neural pathways, something decades ahead of current technology, far beyond anything publicly known about military enhancements. Reggie remembered the rumors whispered years ago about a secret DARPA program that had experimented with neural implants designed to link pilots directly to their aircraft, bypassing traditional controls and enhancing reaction times. It had been officially canceled and erased from records decades ago, yet here was living proof that the program had not only existed, but might still be active, or had been active until very recently. The senior officer stepped forward and tapped Reggie on the shoulder, motioning him to bring up the communication link to Samantha through the simulator headset. The voice crackled through the speakers, clear and calm, and then the question came from the control room, simple and direct. "Samantha, can you tell us about the device behind your ear there?" Was a pause longer than anyone expected, and then her voice came, steady, without hesitation. "I have no choice in this. I have lived with it for years. It connects me to the machine, to the data, to everything. I need to fly. I was part of something classified, something I was never supposed to remember." The words sent a ripple through the team like an electric shock, and suddenly the mission in the simulator lost all meaning. It was no longer a training exercise, but a glimpse into a shadow world of secrets and experiments that blurred the lines between human and machine. As she continued to fly the simulated battlefield with unnatural skill. Her eyes never left the screens, but those watching began to realize that Samantha was not just flying the simulator, she was reliving memories, a history encoded into her very nervous system, memories that no one else was meant to have access to. Behind the scenes, orders were being called in, messages sent to top brass, and security protocols activated. It was clear that Samantha's presence here was an anomaly, and the response would be swift and serious. But for now, the room held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next to the woman who just wanted to fly the Apache simulator, but had awakened something far greater. The hum of the simulator blended with the low murmurs of the control room, but Samantha remained locked in the moment, her hands, steady eyes scanning the digital battlefield as if it were a place she had walked 1,000 times before. Her mind moving faster than anyone could track outside the room, the tension grew heavier every second, her silence more unsettling than any words could. Birji paced behind the glass, unable to tear his eyes away from her, every movement precise, almost mechanical, and yet there was a flicker of something human in her eyes, determination maybe, or fear hidden. So deep it was almost impossible to see. The implant behind her ear seemed to pulse, faintly glowing with a subtle light that no one had noticed before, as if it had a life of its own, a secret heartbeat beneath her skin. The supervisor barked orders to tighten security, to bring in medical experts and intelligence officers to analyze the implant, and to make sure Samantha did not leave the premises until they understood what she truly was, or what she carried inside her. The room was now a cage, and Samantha was both the prisoner and the key. No one knew which yet. Inside the simulator, Samantha pushed forward into the simulated attack mission, her skill unshakable as she dodged enemy fire and guided the Apache through narrow canyon passes, targeting enemy vehicles with deadly precision. Her breathing steady, controlled, her hands never faltering. She was not just flying, she was dancing with the machine, symbiotic and perfect. Suddenly, the system flashed a warning, an anomaly in the neural link, a spike in the interface connection that could not be explained by any known malfunction. Samantha's eyes flickered a microsecond of pain, but she kept going, ignoring the signal. The technicians outside scrambled to analyze the spike. It was like a heartbeat, too fast, too irregular to be human. Then the voice of the senior officer cut through the room, cold and firm. "We need to ask her to remove the headset immediately. Now this is a controlled environment, and no unauthorized hardware is permitted inside the simulator." But Samantha did not respond, not at first, her focus absolute, as if she was locked in some invisible grip. The connection between her and the simulator, growing stronger with every passing second. Reggie tried to speak to her through the headset. "Samantha, we need you to remove the device now. This is not a game." But his voice sounded distant, even to himself, as if it was underwater, a thin barrier separating them from the woman who seemed to be slipping away into something else, something beyond the simulation, beyond the control room, beyond everything they knew. Suddenly, without warning, Samantha's fingers moved rapidly across the controls, shutting down systems, activating emergency protocols, and then powering down the simulator completely. The screens went dark, the room plunged into silence, except for her voice, calm and steady, but heavy, with meaning. "I cannot remove it. Not yet. It is part of me, and if I try, it will take over completely." The statement hung in the air, like a threat, a warning, a confession, and the officers exchanged uneasy glances. The implications were staggering. This was not just a woman with a secret implant, this was a living weapon, a walking experiment, a link between man and machine. Still active, and still dangerous. Security moved in quietly but cautiously, surrounding Samantha as she finally lifted her head from the cockpit, her eyes meeting theirs with an intensity that stopped them cold. She was no longer just a guest or a civilian. She was something else, something much more, and the story they had stumbled into was only just beginning. The control room was thick with tension as security personnel closed in around Samantha, her movements slow, deliberate, as if weighing her next action, her eyes sharp, scanning the faces around her, the same calm, steady gaze that had mesmerized and unsettled everyone who had watched her fly moments ago. She was no longer just a visitor, she was a mystery wrapped in silence and secrecy. Reggie stood at the edge of the room, his hands clenched tight, feeling a mixture of awe and fear. He had worked With pilots for years, but never anyone like this, someone who could blend so seamlessly with technology and yet carry something so deeply hidden. Beneath her skin, it was as if she was both pilot and machine, in one flawless form. The medical team entered cautiously, carrying small, portable scanners and equipment designed to detect implants and cybernetic devices. Samantha said nothing as they approached her. Slowly starting their examination, they focused on the implant behind her ear. The tiny metallic device glowing faintly under the scanner, the readings beyond anything in their databases. Something experimental, almost alien in its complexity. One of the doctors asked, softly, "Samantha, can you tell us what this device does?" She looked up, meeting his gaze for a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "It connects me to the aircraft, to the data streams. To my own thoughts. It's a link that lets me control the machine faster than any human reflex, but it is also a prison. Something I cannot escape." From the words hung heavy in the air, a confession and a warning, all at once. The room seemed to shrink as the reality settled in. Samantha was no longer just a woman, she was a living weapon designed and modified by unknown hands, carrying technology far beyond anything the military wanted the world to know. Reggie found himself asking the questions everyone was afraid to voice. What had happened to her? How had she gotten this implant? And why had she been left to live among civilians? What secrets did she hold, locked away behind that calm exterior and those haunted eyes? Samantha hesitated, then spoke slowly. "The program that put this inside me was shut down years ago, or so they said, but the device still talks to me. It feeds me information, gives me control, but it also controls parts of my mind, parts I cannot reach. It watches and waits, and sometimes I hear things no one else should hear." The room grew colder as the implications sank deeper. No one knew who those unknown hands were, but clearly they had the power to create something both amazing and terrifying, something they wanted buried in shadows and silence. But Samantha had brought it all into the light. Security tightened their grip, moving her gently toward a secure holding area, a place where she could be studied, questioned, and watched without risk to others. But Samantha did not resist. She seemed resigned, calm, as if she knew this was the next step in a plan far beyond her control. As she was led away, Reggie felt a pang of sympathy, mixed with something like hope. Maybe she was still human after all. Maybe there was a way to help her break free from whatever invisible chains bound her to this machine and to the shadowy past that had given her this gift and this curse. But the questions remained unanswered, and the deeper they dug, the more they realized Samantha was not just a woman who wanted to fly the Apache simulator. She was a key to a secret that could change everything. And someone was watching, waiting for her next move. The secure holding area was cold, sterile, and humming faintly with the sound of machines monitoring Samantha's every move, but she remained composed, calm, as if the sterile environment meant nothing compared to the chaos inside her mind. Her eyes flickered once toward the small window, watching the distant figures move beyond the glass and then back down to the floor. Reggie sat just outside the observation room, his thoughts racing faster than the blinking monitors. He had questions that burned deep, questions no one in the facility seemed ready to answer. Why had Samantha been left alone with this implant for so long? Why had the program that created her vanished? And yet here, she was a living artifact of secrets, best kept hidden. Remembered the briefings about neural interface projects decades ago, the classified experiments that promised to revolutionize warfare, making pilots part machine, part weapon, but all of them had been officially canceled and scrubbed from records. No trace, no proof, and yet Samantha was undeniable proof of what they had never wanted to admit inside the holding room. Samantha's fingers twitched involuntarily, her hand brushing the scar behind her ear, the faint edge of the implant just beneath the skin. Sometimes it buzzed, a strange sensation, like 1,000 whispers in her brain. A presence she could not silence, a voice that kept her tethered to a world she wanted to forget. The medical officer stepped forward cautiously and said, "Samantha, we want to help you understand what this device is and what it does, but we need your cooperation. Can you tell us anything about the people who put this in?" Ushi looked up, her eyes sharp and distant, like she was staring through time and space, and said, "The people who did this were not just scientists or soldiers, they were something else, something dangerous. They called it evolution, but it was really control. They wanted to create the perfect pilot, the perfect soldier, but I am not sure if they succeeded or if they made a monster." We listened closely, the words striking a chord of fear and sympathy. He wondered if Samantha felt like a prisoner in her own body, or if she had accepted her fate as something inevitable, something written in her DNA and in the metal beneath her skin. As the hours passed, a team of intelligence agents arrived, bringing new equipment and questions. More direct, more urgent, the facility had alerted higher powers, and now the stakes were higher. Samantha's presence was no longer a curiosity, it was a matter of national security, something that could not be ignored or contained. Quietly anymore, one agent spoke flatly to Samantha with a hint of command in his voice. "We need to know everything about the implant, how it works, what it controls, and most importantly, who gave it to you. If you cooperate, you might get answers you never had before." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the calm broke. A flash of something fierce and wild crossed her face. Warning maybe, or a plea. Before she whispered, "The implant is alive. It is part of me, but it is not human. It is not what you think it is, something older, something more powerful, and it listens to someone or something else." The room fell silent again, and the agents exchanged uneasy looks. None of them had heard anything like this before. Samantha was no longer just a pilot or a test subject. She was a puzzle with pieces that did not fit any known pattern, a key to a door that should have remained locked. Reggie sat back, watching her carefully, knowing that whatever came next would change everything for Samantha, and for all of them. The quiet civilian, who just wanted to fly the Apache simulator, had become the center of a storm, far beyond the control of anyone in that room or anywhere else. The night had settled over the facility, casting long shadows through the sterile hallways as Samantha sat alone in her holding room. The dim glow of the monitors reflecting faintly off the smooth metal of the implant behind her ear, a reminder of everything she carried and everything she had lost or maybe never had to begin with. The silence was heavy, but it was filled with memories. She could not escape outside her room. Reggie paced restlessly, the questions spinning faster in his mind than he could speak them. He had watched her fly the Apache simulator with an expertise that defied explanation, and now every detail about her past felt like a locked door without a key, a puzzle missing too many pieces to ever be solved. Easily or quickly, the intelligence agents had come and gone, leaving behind an uneasy tension and new protocols that limited who could see or speak to Samantha. The higher-ups wanted results, but no one had answers, and the deeper they dug, the more complicated the truth seemed to become, especially when Samantha began to speak in fragments, cryptic phrases about voices and commands that did not belong to her. One afternoon, Samantha suddenly whispered a name, a code word, something ancient-sounding, and yet completely alien, something that sent a shiver down Reggie's spine, because it was a word he had heard only once before in classified files. Buried deep in the archives, long thought destroyed, it was the name of a secret operation, a project, so secret that most had forgotten it even existed, until now Reggie found himself researching feverishly, going through old military databases, government files, and declassified documents, searching for any clue that connected Samantha to the forgotten project. The more he found, the darker the picture became. A program started decades ago meant to create super soldiers, linked directly to advanced machines through neural implants. But it was abruptly shut down after unexplained incidents and disappearances seemed to carry the legacy of that program, a living link to a past the government had tried to erase, but that technology had survived inside her body, silently waiting for a trigger or a command she did not fully understand or control, yet her skills were proof that it worked better than anyone ever expected. The implant behind her ear pulsed faintly as if alive, sit motionless, whispering in a language no one recognized or understood, a language that felt like it belonged to another time or place. Reggie became obsessed, piecing together fragments of her story and the project codename, until one night, as he stared at a faded photo of a younger Samantha with eyes that held secrets far beyond her years, he realized she was not just a pilot, she was the final prototype, the last survivor of an experiment meant to change warfare forever. But with that realization came a chilling question. What if the implant was not only a tool, but a weapon, a device that could turn Samantha from ally to threat in an instant, a trigger waiting to be pulled by someone who still had plans for the technology she embodied? As Reggie sat back in his chair, the weight of what he had discovered pressing down on him, he knew that the woman who just wanted to fly the Apache simulator had become something much more, something dangerous, and that the story was far from over. Days had passed since Samantha was placed in the secure holding area, but the questions only multiplied. The officials convened behind closed doors, debating what to do with the living enigma. Before them, the implant behind her ear had become the focal point of every discussion. Some saw her as a breakthrough, proof that advanced neural technology was possible. Others feared she was a ticking time bomb, something unpredictable and uncontrollable. Samantha, meanwhile, remained distant and silent, refusing to cooperate fully with the investigations, her eyes holding a mixture of defiance and exhaustion, as if carrying a burden. No one else could see. The implant pulsed faintly beneath her skin, sending waves of signals she could neither explain nor suppress. Sometimes the signals overwhelmed her, leaving her disoriented and vulnerable. In moments like those, she clutched the edges of the chair, whispering what little information he could find about the classified neural interface, projects the hidden experiments that blurred the lines between human and machine, and the shadowy organizations that funded them. His colleagues warned him that digging too deep might be dangerous, but he could not stop, not when Samantha's fate hung in the balance. Samantha's implant, and a covert operation called Project Genesis, a secret initiative aimed at creating human pilots fused with machine intelligence to achieve unprecedented battlefield dominance. The files hinted at catastrophic failures at the project's end, including unexplained disappearances and rumored cover-ups. Reggie knew that if Samantha was truly connected to Project Genesis, then the implant was not just a tool, but part of something much larger, something still active in shadows. Outside, the government were watching, waiting for any sign that the project's power could be unleashed again. Back in her cell, Samantha's mind raced as the implant sent bursts of data, flooding her thoughts. She struggled to maintain control, but sometimes it was too much. The voices grew louder, the commands sharper, and for brief moments, she felt herself slipping away, losing the fragile grip on her identity. She had fought so hard to hold on to. The medical team observed these episodes with growing concern, realizing that the implant was not just enhancing her abilities, but also slowly consuming her mind. A battle between Samantha's humanity and the relentless machine connection. Wired into her very brain, the question was, how long she could resist before she became something else. Reggie knew they needed a way to disconnect the implant without destroying what was left of Samantha's mind, but every attempt so far had failed. The technology was far beyond anything they had encountered. It was adaptive, evolving, responding to their interventions as if it had its own will to survive in the quiet moments between tests. Samantha whispered again, a word Reggie had not heard before, a name or a place he could not decipher. But he recorded it, hoping it might be a clue to unlock the mystery she carried locked beneath her skin, the mystery of the woman who just wanted to fly the Apache simulator but was trapped inside a machine of her own, making as the facility prepared for another round of tests. A new urgency filled the air, a race against time to save Samantha from herself and the unseen forces tethered to the implant. The story was building toward a climax that none of them could yet foresee, but one thing was certain: the truth was far darker and more complicated than anyone had imagined. The final days in the holding facility moved like a slow storm. Samantha's condition fluctuated, her mind a battleground between the fragile human will and the relentless machine pulsing beneath. Her skin, the implant, seemed to grow stronger, feeding on her thoughts, her memories, and her very sense of self. With every passing hour, the lines between pilot and weapon blurred until even those who watched closely struggled to tell where Samantha ended and the machine began. Reggie stayed by her side, as much as possible, silently observing the woman who just wanted to fly the Apache simulator, but had become a living enigma, a puzzle of flesh and circuitry intertwined in ways no one could unravel. Easily, he felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him, the hope that she could be saved, and the fear that the technology inside her might never be controlled. One night, Samantha suddenly spoke, breaking the silence, her voice low but clear. I remember now the voices, the commands, the name. They called it Genesis, but it was more than a project. It was a choice, a curse, a chain that bound me to this implant and to those who made me not just a pilot, but a weapon, waiting to be unleashed. Reggie listened carefully as she described flashes of memories, not her own visions of battles, raging skies filled with fire and destruction. A feeling of power and loss intertwined, as if the implant held echoes of those who had come before her, soldiers fused with machines like her, but lost to the very technology meant to save them. The team worked frantically, trying to find a way to sever the link without destroying Samantha's fragile mind. The implant resisted every attempt, adapting, changing, as if alive, feeding on the conflict inside. Her making each intervention more dangerous than the last, but Reggie refused to give up his faith in her humanity. A stubborn light in the darkness then one day. A breakthrough came when a junior technician noticed a pattern in the implant's neural signals, a rhythm, almost musical, something that could be used to communicate with it, a language. Not spoken, but felt a code hidden within the pulses that might unlock the implant's grip and give Samantha back her mind with great care. The team crafted a sequence to send through the implant a digital lullaby, designed to soothe the machine inside, to calm its hunger, and gently pull it back from the edge of control as the sequence played through the speakers. Samantha's eyes fluttered. Her body relaxed, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled, a small, fragile smile. But a smile nonetheless. The silence that followed was heavy with hope and relief. The storm had not passed completely, but a moment of peace had been won, a fragile truce between flesh and metal, a chance for Samantha to reclaim the pilot's seat in her own life, not just in the simulatory. Knew the journey was far from over, that the shadows around the Project Genesis still loomed large, and that forces beyond their control would not let go easily. But for now there was light in the darkness. A woman who just wanted to fly the Apache simulator had found a way to soar a Ganaz. Samantha looked out the window at the rising sun. A new day began, a day filled with uncertainty, but also possibility. The past was still there, waiting, but so was the future. And for the first time in a long time, Samantha was ready to face it head on.